Hi, welcome to Melton Vineyard YouTube channel. My name's George. I'm one of the senior pastors here at Melton Vineyard, along with my wife Caroline. And we'd like to invite you to come to our in-person services at John Fernley College, 10:30 on Sundays. We look forward to seeing you there. God bless.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Natalie, and I've been a member of this church family for about 16 years. For most of that time, a long time now. For most of that time, I've been a teacher up at Birchwood Special School, but just recently, almost a year ago, I took up the post as storehouse coordinator. So it's been a very exciting year for me, getting to know what God's doing in that ministry. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but first, a question. Oh, I'm out of breath. I went to get my water. Have you ever lost something? Could be something really valuable, or it could just be your keys, but maybe right before you've got to go out. Most recently for me, it was a small Playmobil sword. Very small Playmobil sword that I was sent to look for on behalf of my 5-year-old son. Much to my frustration, it was so valuable to his play at that particular point that no other Playmobil weapon would do, of course. No toothpick could be substituted for the sword. I tried, believe me. It had to be that one, and it had to be now. All play was halted until the sword was found. And this is what I had to start with. Needle in a haystack comes to mind. But I was determined. I had to be. People talk about fight or flight when we're faced with danger, and I really think there should be a similar phrase used to describe what happens to us when we're searching for something. It's all systems go, isn't it? We think of all the places in our house that we haven't been to for months, turn furniture upside down, throw cushions around, have nightmares that maybe a child's eaten it or a pet. I haven't got pets, but maybe you can relate to that, maybe not all of it, but if you can, hold that thought, because I'm going to tell a story from the Bible about a lost coin. It can be found in the book of Luke, and just to provide some background to the story, in this chapter, Jesus is talking with the religious leaders who are questioning the company that Jesus keeps. It says, "Now the tax collectors and the sinners were all gathered around to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees, the religious leaders at the time, and the teachers of the law muttered, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' They clearly had a very strong idea of who should be in and who should be out of their religion. And they did not approve of Jesus crossing that line. In response to them, Jesus tells this story. It's in Luke chapter 15, verses 8 to 10. It's the parable of the lost coin. "Suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and she loses one. Doesn't she light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she finds it, she calls her friends and neighbors together and she says, 'Rejoice with me, I have found my lost coin.' In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." This is one of 3 parables that Jesus tells in this section of Luke. And at face value, it's a really simple story about God's love for the lost. But actually, if we dig a bit deeper, there's quite a lot to unpick. So parables were stories, usually set in everyday situations with characters that people at the time would have immediately understood and related to. We don't live in that time anymore, so it's helpful to understand a bit more of that context to fully get the point that Jesus wanted to make and the point that people at the time would have more easily understood. So firstly, the coins. We don't know much about them. We don't know why she had them. Why 10? Were they worth a lot or a little? And again, these are important questions to ask because we want to know why Jesus has used this specific example. Some scholars have explored the idea that the coins were part of a dowry, maybe as part of a headdress or a piece of jewellery, and this would have been an expense that the husband would have paid to a wife in marriage, as was the custom at the time. Maybe they were. More recently, it's quite widely believed that the coins were about the value of the wage for a poor labourer. So we think that she probably worked for the money and that the woman was poor. That's important because of what happens next. Jesus asks the question, doesn't she light a lamp? Wouldn't you switch on a light if you were looking for something? Remember the feeling of searching that we recalled earlier? Of course we would. However, according to some commentators, we should be open to the possibility that the answer Jesus is inviting us to is actually no. She wouldn't necessarily. This is the point that Steve Burnhope makes, and I found his commentary really helpful. He says that if the woman was poor, the cost of the oil that she'd have to use in the lamp was at risk of outweighing the cost of the coin. Therefore, she'd have to weigh up the certainty of the cost of the oil against the uncertainty of finding the coin. He says the risk-averse, or the sensible thing to do, would just be to give up on the coin. Maybe one day it would turn up anyway, and in the meantime, she's preserved her other assets. And he also goes on to shed light on her sweeping the house. Sweeping might dislodge the coin, hiding it even further. As with the dust that could be created with sweeping, it could further obscure the coin, making it even harder to find. So that in itself was a risk. So, taking these details into account, it seems that the emphasis of this story is not on the lostness of the coin. It's on the passion of the owner to find it. She goes to surprising and costly lengths, above and beyond what is sensible and prudent. Why? Because she values the lost item so highly. That is the picture of God that Jesus wants us to see. We are the coins, and God is the one searching for us. That includes every single one of us. He isn't just concerned with the people who already follow him. In fact, like with the coins, the interests of the 9 are secondary to the interest of the ones that are lost, the one that is lost. And this, of course, angered the Pharisees, the religious leaders who Jesus is talking to. They clearly saw themselves in the found category and believed that God was only focused on them. Now, I would imagine that most of us here would welcome and possibly already know the kind of God that Jesus is describing, one who puts the lost at the centre of his sights. Certainly in theory. But we are human. And sometimes we can get caught up in thinking like the Pharisees. We draw divisions without realising it. I know that I do. Those people are in and those people are out. Jesus belongs to this kind of person or group, but not that. And we can justify our thinking by being convinced that we're on the right side of history, when others clearly are not. And dare I say that recently our society seems more divided than ever. And in some ways it's not surprising. We're living in a fractured world. We've all got different experiences that shape our feelings towards those that are different from us. But this is why we need to see through God's eyes. Jesus knew this, and his stories, as well as his life, model and demonstrate the worth of every individual in God's eyes, including people from every aspect of society. However, the Bible does reveal that God has particular compassion for vulnerable groups in society, those who might be oppressed, psychologically, economically, or emotionally. And people can be poor or oppressed in all of these areas. Throughout the Old Testament, as well as the New, God is seen as the defender of these vulnerable groups who often find themselves on the outside of legitimate or high society. Psalm 146 says this: He executes justice for the oppressed and gives food to the hungry. He lifts up those who are bound down. The Lord loves those who live justly. The Lord watches over the immigrant and sustains the fatherless and the widow. So if this is a picture of God that we see throughout the Bible, and we know that sometimes we fall short, what are we to do? Well, you could say that the blueprint in the Bible is enough, a script, as it were. But following God is so much more exciting than a rule book, even if the rules are nice positive ones, like to look after the lost. God invites us to more than this. He wants us to be transformed from the inside out. And even when we don't get it right, when we judge others, when we decide what we think is right, it's helpful to remember that God doesn't want us to pretend. He created us in his image. Genesis 1 says God created us in his own image. Therefore, we get to reflect what comes from him to grow more in his image. C.S. Lewis says, "There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations, these are mortal. They will die. It is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, or exploit." Another way of saying it is this. This is from Tim Keller in his book, Generous Justice. The Bible teaches that the sacredness of God has in some way been imparted to humanity, so that every human life is sacred and every human being has dignity. This should shape our identity as well as the way in which we treat others. So what could that look like in action? So I want to return to the coin here, or rather to the woman who searches for the coin. Remember the risks that she takes and the lengths and the cost that she goes to. Remember how that reflects the way in which God searches for every single one of us. In some Bible translations, it reads as seeking diligently, really emphasizing the effort and the passion involved. Steve Burnhope says it's an assiduous searching after, persevering, unremitting, hard work. It's also how we are invited to seek the kingdom in the book of Matthew, which really means just to live in a way that puts God's priorities, when God's priorities become our own. I think as a church we can be really encouraged here. I really love the way that individuals and families welcome people into their homes, offer prayer on the streets, advocate for refugees who need sanctuary, bless the community. All of these are examples of how we are seeking the lost, diligently, passionately, and without judgment. Storehouse is also one of those ways that we want to honour and God's image and demonstrate his love. As a compassion ministry of Melton Vineyard, our vision is to demonstrate God's love through generosity, treating people with dignity and respect, enabling people to build self-confidence and self-esteem, and helping them to reach their full potential. So for those who don't know Storehouse, this happens through a food bank, which people can access through referral, a free cafe, which is open 3 days a week, offering 3 hot meals a week, and that's open to anybody. And we also have showering facilities for people who might be sofa surfing or sleeping rough. And it's amazing to see how Storehouse has grown from Melton Vineyard's initial vision 12 years ago, or 14 years ago, to its small beginnings, famously in Franca's garage. Franca was a member of Melton Vineyard here for many, many years. It went to the Fox pub and eventually into the church building we're in now. However, whatever form it's taken, the vision has always been the same, to be a token of God's love, treating people with the dignity and respect that the Bible calls us to. It hasn't come without commitment or hard work from people over the years who have sown into it, including many of yourselves, financially, spiritually, and time-wise. But as a church, This is how we seek diligently, search with passion, and go to great lengths, just like God does for every one of us. John Wimber, who founded the Vineyard, says this: if we ever ignore the poor and needy, we are as good as dead as a people. And Jesus himself says, suppose your brother or sister is without food or clothes, or daily food or clothes. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? And Jesus says, they do not need to go away. You give them something. We've got many testimonies from people at Storehouse who've described the impact that it's had on their lives. And there was a lovely moment after the Christmas meal this year. This is done every year, and we know that some of our visitors who attend that Christmas meal don't get to sit down with their families for different reasons and have a Christmas meal. After the meal, one gentleman who was with a group of friends stood up and he thanked everybody for what they'd done. I can't believe it, he said. I just can't believe it. You've gone to all this trouble to give us a proper Christmas dinner. Thank you so much. Now, that was nice, but it's what one of the volunteers heard his friend say to him afterwards. As he patted him on the back, his friend said, well done. I know how hard it is for you to say something like that. I can only hope that in his gratitude, he sees something of the generous God who motivates us to serve. Storehouse is not perfect. How could it be? But just like Jesus paints a picture of a God who searches passionately for us, we hope that we're honouring his image in what we do and how we serve there. And this is where you come in. I would really love to invite you to be part of Storehouse. Not because we're desperately short of people or resources or it might fall apart without you, but it's because it's who we are as a church. One of the lovely things I've realised since I've been there is how it sparks curiosity from people. They want to know why as well as how. Sorry. And it's always a privilege to be able to say that part of our faith is giving time and resources. So when people ask about Storehouse, they find out about a church and churches together who are committed to seeking God's heart for the town. If this is resonating with you, there are some practical ways to get involved. And I can't emphasize prayer enough. And I really mean that. We would love your prayers. We really want people to know God. And you could be praying for his presence at Storehouse, as well as opportunities for us to pray for people there where appropriate. You could lift Debs up in her new mentoring role. We prayed for Debs last week, and she's just taken up the role of mentor. And this is going to create space for people to really grow and move forward, helping us to fulfill our vision and enable people to gain confidence. We would love to see our visitors set free from addiction, ill health, and financial instability. And of course, only God can fully do that. So please do pray. Storehouse Life Group. Stuart and Maria run a Storehouse Life Group, which allows people from Storehouse to access church in their own way. I've asked them to share what they said, what they want to share, and they said that some of their group are facing extremely challenging circumstances, but they come and they listen, especially for the Bible part. At times, they've had up to 40 people to hear a testimony, and it's not unusual for them to have 20 to 30 people. There's obviously a real hunger there. Their group is on the Life Group sign-up page, and I'm sure that they'd really welcome any questions if you're interested in joining them or supporting them. And of course, you could volunteer. I know not everybody can, but if you're thinking about it, we would love volunteers from Melton Vineyard. We would love people from church to be available to possibly pray for people where appropriate and to just be part of it. We do want you to be part of Storehouse in whatever way you can. But more than that, we would love you to know just how valuable you are to God. Being rooted in that knowledge, we'd love to invite you to ask God where he might be asking you personally to search, to be growing in compassion for others. Compassion isn't just one ministry in our church. It is part of who we are and who we are becoming as we follow God. It's likely that the more involved we become in our community, the more we tell, the more likely it is that people will come who have never been to church before or are not the people we'd normally meet. So let's continue to welcome people warmly here, to talk to our friends, to talk to our neighbours. Remember the scene that Jesus was speaking into when he told the story of the lost coin. What really surprises the religious leaders is that Jesus presents a God whose way of seeking after the lost starts from hospitality towards them, rather than denouncing them. And hospitality is a powerful way to express God's compassion. It happens here, in our hearts, here in the church, as well as out there through outreach.